Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar on the first look to Nuke 11. I'm Juan Salazar, Nuke Studio Product Manager, and I'll be showing you all the new exciting things that we have in Nuke 11 for you today. So let's start. The first thing I want to talk about is what we have done related to performance and updating to the latest industry standards. So completely updated based on the VFX Reference Platform 2017. A group of the VFX houses with the software vendors, and between all of us we decide which libraries and which file formats do we all agree on, so it is easier for everyone to set up their pipelines. So on this year we have updated to the new GCC, to Python, PySide. We have also updated OpenEXR, Alembic, FBX for all the ingest of those 3D file formats, and obviously 2D. Including as well, we now have updated the SDK for the red files and for Array. So now you can ingest all the latest from those camera manufacturers. We are really happy with this. It has been a lot of work, but it means again a really core base work for Nuke and Nuke Studio to then build upon. So, well, as I know this will excite a lot of you TDs and pipeline guys out there, I'm gonna now move into the future work, which a lot of you artists are actually looking for. So on that note, I'm gonna move into what we have done. And the first thing we have done is make sure that your day-to-day tools are faster and more efficient. So we have updated a few nodes. So let's jump into them. So the first node I want to show you today is the Denoise node. So I'm gonna create a Denoise, and it as always works with the GPU. I can grab and pick the area that I want to do. But what has changed on it? Well, quite a few bits, and there is quite a major changes. The first one and most important is temporal processing. So that means that now we can do denoising paying attention to frames around the frame that I'm doing the denoise on, which means I can frame blend and how is the effect of those frames that I'm gonna pick into the denoise of that frame, and you have the amount of frames that you're gonna do. So if I push that to 3, let's say it, or 5, start seeing obviously now I have quite a big influence onto it, and it's gonna start kind of ghosting a little bit from other frames. But you can see the denoise is gonna be quite big. Let's actually try and pick something around there. And if I deactivate that, hopefully you can see all the denoise. Let's actually go full screen so you can see that. I'm gonna go even closer. So yep, so activate and deactivate, and hopefully you can see that how we're doing the denoising. So the main thing is actually using motion vectors inside the denoiser to do that. So one of the other things that we have added is we have added a motion input, which means we are now using motion vectors on a lot of the nodes and the nodes that you use day to day. So why not give the input? Because you're going to generate those motion vectors either through the vector generator or the smart vectors. So I'm going to create very quickly here. I have a tool set for my denoise. So I have my file, oops, my motion vector. So if I swap here to my motion pass, you'll see I have the motion vectors for the shot. And I can connect those motion vectors into my motion, and that will make my denoiser work way faster, because now all my motion vectors are already calculated for me. So that is the major part of the enhancement into a denoise node. Now we have also added a few more things. One is, we all know that when you're doing especially denoising on raw footage, you normally have super blacks and super whites, and sometimes you get kind of artifacts of different things, and it's better to leave the blacks, do the denoising, and then bring them back down. So for that reason we have added just an op, so you don't have to do it manually. We can do it just straight into the node. That will leave the blacks and push them back down, which again makes your life a lot easier. And we have also added preserve edges, and this is quite nice, especially for example now I'm doing a really strong denoising, and I'm blending quite a lot. So if I do preserve edges, you will see how it's sharp in certain areas, and you get nicer edges around. If you can see, let's try and find some hair. There you go. You can see there how I'm starting to bring, I'm actually just looking at the blue channel and kind of how that is improving on my edges. So, oops, I didn't want to create a grade. Cool. So that is the first node I wanted to show you, which is again the Denoise node now with improved temporal processing, so you can now mix more frames together and make sure you have a better denoise throughout the plate. And clearly it's using more motion vectors. Now the second tool I wanted to show you for the day-to-day work is actually more based for junior artists or mid-level artists that want to learn new techniques or are not sure how people is using certain type of techniques in Nuke. So we have now included a whole new set of tool sets for 2D and 3D. You have now how to recreate a CG beauty pass from all the major renderers. You have how to do keying, for example. So in this case, I'm going to do this key. I could very simply give myself some space. Let's actually put it around here so you can see it. And I'm going to go and create that new toolset for keying. And now it brings the whole keying setup on how to use edge keying, the core key, and how to mix it together, and how you do the color correction for the plates and the despilling, how you copy that matte and pre-mold it all together and merge it to your background. So it shows you everything that you want and how to learn how to use it, and it has some explanations at the bottom on how it is working. And here you also have, if you want to find the example files, you can just click on this node and it will give you to download the examples if you want to use it. Again, this has a lot of new tool sets to do with different parts. So again, CG, smart vectors, and how to do fixes and grading using the smart vectors. You also have 3D for doing particles. We have updated all the particles which we had before, but we have also now have projection and rig removal, and also for relighting. Cool. So I have driven you through 2 new features now. Now the third one I want to show you in your day-to-day work is rendering. So we spend a lot of time rendering, and most of the time what happens is you have to render and you have to wait for it and so on. So we tried to make it faster, and what we did is we brought the technology that we have in Nuke Studio into Nuke, and that's the frame server. So if I'm gonna render now, I'll be able to render using frame server. I'm gonna render just a few frames. Let's not render the whole thing. So let's say probably from 148, so we only render about 200 frames. Gonna say okay, and as you can see, there is no progress bar anymore. But what I can do is open my new tab called background renders, and here it will show you the read node that you sent to render, and it will show the progress for it. So it's using the background, it's launching Nuke in the background based on the amount of cores that you have. It will be able to distribute that, and you can see that now we have this icon at the bottom that is telling us what is happening on Nuke. So it's telling you about the memory usage, CPU usage, disk reading, network usage if you're using network files. And at the moment, if you see, the progress is happening here at the bottom because the frame server is in progress. Now you also have a logs that will give you information about each frame, how long it's taking to render each frame, and everything else about it. So if there is any errors, you'll see the errors there. And now you can see that the button changed to OK, meaning the frame server is live and is not in use. So the cool thing about this is it will actually create a temporal file for rendering the clip, which means I can continue working or put multiple write nodes. So let's duplicate that write node for a moment, and let's make this write node now, instead of EXRs, let's say I want to render DPXs or JPEGs, because I'm gonna, reformat that and use them for proxy. So let's use a reformat here very quickly, and let's put this into scale, and I'm gonna put that to 0.5. There you are. So I'm gonna render this with a different name clearly, so I need another name for that. So let's say low res, and there you are. So if I render these guys now, again, using the same thing, the frame server, say okay. Now if I look at my background renders, you can see now I have a second write node here, and it will be able to know each one, the progress. I could do the same thing, re-render something for this one, and it'll be able to pick up the different versions that I'm rendering. Another really cool thing I can do with the frame server is rendering for my flipbook. So if I'm doing flipbooking, now you have the ability as well to use frame server and being able to flipbook while you're still working on the rest of it. So you can test bits and pieces and flipbook at any given point from any part of your node graph. So that is the frame server. The next node I want to talk about is the lens distortion node. So we have done a revamp of the whole node. We have made it GPU accelerated, but more importantly, we have now made it a really powerful tool and a world-class tool for estimating lenses and removing distortion. It is a new and highly flexible, and is designed to work with existing lens estimation tools like 3D equalizer. So now you can do now fisheye lens distortions. You can bring distortions again from 3D equalizer or from CARVR type of distortions. So you have now a much more powerful node that has a lot more models for your lenses and be way more accurate. One really powerful thing of it is the ability to use grids, and not just by using a frame for grid, but you can actually use several frames and calculate the lens distortion on the different frames to get a more accurate solve into it. And again, it's just a matter of undistorting your plates, being able to add elements and redistort the whole plate and back into the way it was shot or produce those elements. I could have spent the whole day here explaining the different parts, the different areas. It has been a massive revamp of the node. So I'm gonna actually say on this one, we are on beta, go out, test it, do a lot with it, and let us know what you're thinking. So the last node that I want to show you that we have updated is the Smart Vector. And I'm really happy with this because we released this on Nuke 10 and people have jumped into it massively. It's a great tool that has helped people doing a lot of different types of jobs on cleanups, putting stencils onto things, and there are two major things that we wanted to update with it because of the amount of people that have been using it. The first one is related to a generation of the smart vectors. So the first thing is now you have an output to write node for the smart vectors, which means you can now render on the render farm or using the frame server to generate those vectors. As more tools, as I said before, with the Denoise and the smart vector toolset that are using the vectors, well, you're generating a lot of this very early on in the process. So doing the smart vectors on the render farm or on the frame server is going to be a great increase on the speed. Now the next part is quite simple. So let's have a look at this shot. So we're gonna add some stuff into the skirt, so the tutu, and obviously it's moving a lot and it's quite a long shot. What would happen normally with a shot like this is with whatever we are adding, we'll get through as it moves through it. So we are adding this decal onto the whole thing. You can see how as it progresses through the shot, so it will go moving around, but as it progresses, some of the edges and lines start wobbling a bit. And that is just because we're pushing this through too many frames and we're getting some distortion. So what we added into this vector distort is a blur size knob. And it looks like a simple thing, but it makes a massive difference. And if we actually start pushing that, you'll see how that changes into kind of the really wobbly areas. So if we look at something like here where it's really wobbly, and changing to actually keeping as much of that detail and not wobbling throughout. So if the tool was getting you 80% there and you'll have to use different vector distorts to patch throughout, then hopefully with this new blur size knob you'll be able to use it for getting you 90% there into your shots. So we think this is going to be a great increase of usage, and again it's just a matter of getting the whole shot kind of nicer, and you can see all that detail. Imagine doing this with a grid warp or anything like that. It would have been a pain and it would have taken hours and hours. Using the smart vectors, it really takes that away, and all that technical side is done, and you can concentrate on making it look amazing. So there you are, that's the updates to the smart vector distort. Cool, so we have had a look at all the day-to-day tools that we have updated or revamped completely to make a faster and more efficient workflows. Now what's next? Well, we didn't only want to update what was there, but we thought that there was a need to create a new collaborative workflow. And this, I think, is going to be one of the biggest things in Nuke for a really, really long time. And what it is something called live groups. And live groups is a new way to collaborate between artists. It allows you to use two new types of nodes, one called live group, that is the one that you're going to have in your different comps, and a live input node, which will reside inside the live group to know from which comp and from where it's actually reading the files. This would allow you to create workflows where you can use a live group, almost like a gizmo, that you send to different comps, and you can reload those or update those in an easier way than doing it with gizmos. The other workflow is when you have collaborative on a single shot between artists. So let's say you normally will have an artist working in the background, foreground, and midground of a shot, or on the finishing of the shot, or when you have artists working on roto while you're doing the rest of the comp. And normally what happens is you have to render those different areas, either the background or the rotos, and then pass that on for the next artist. Using live groups, you can have a live connection between those scripts and update them as you need, so they have their own versioning system, and you can have their own version of those nodes that are internal, again, either on a separate script, or you can even take some of those parameters out into that live group and use it to pass data into other comps. So for example, you can have camera tracking, cameras or coming from a camera track, or 2D tracking data or color data, transform data that you can actually use for the artist that is working on the master comp to tweak parts of that live group. So let me show you this in actual context. So let me take you through this shot as a supervisor, and then I'm going to share part of this shot with an artist that is going to do the keying and an artist that is going to do the background while I do the finishing of the comp. So what I'm going to do is just create a comp for the whole thing. So I'm going to create a comp for that. And let's go into that comp. Don't save that. Cool. So what I have here is my different elements just put together as I had them in the timeline, using just the chroma keyer and putting the plates there. So what I want is to distribute this around. So again, I have the green screen that I actually showed you earlier. So I have my artist that's going to go and use that new denoise and the tool sets to create the keying for it. And I have a background area that I want my artist to work in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the foreground first. I'm going to go right click, others, and I'm going to go and find live group. And oops, I only selected one single thing, which is a mistake. There you are. Let's do that again. And live group. And again, somehow I'm missing this. So let's do it this way. Live group. And I'm gonna pick the output to be the black outside, and I'm gonna say okay. And that has just generated my live group. Now, what you saw is it created a new kind of set of nodes here that I can now see separately, and I can publish for my artist to use. So if I go and publish that, I can just go and select the folder where I'm gonna go. I'm gonna call this King live group version 1. I'm gonna say open that and okay. And yes, okay, there you go. So I just wrote that out, and that's a file that my artist can go and pick up very, very quickly to start working. And I'm gonna go and do the background as well. So I'm gonna set up all my plates, and I'm gonna go and create again live group. And what I want is, now I can reorganize this a tiny bit quickly. Oops. So like that. So I have that background there. And let's publish the background as well. So I'm gonna go publish and find my folder. This time I'm gonna call this not King but BG. This is my background. Cool. And I'm gonna say open and okay. There. So now I have my live groups ready for the artist to pick up. Up to now, this doesn't feel as much of a difference as creating pre-comps, but you'll see the first one is we don't have write notes at the bottom, so you are not writing anything. But the main thing will be to add things in the middle or use this, as I said before, with data. So what I actually have is I have the camera, the 3D camera that we generated for this shot for doing the 3D. So I want everyone to share the same elements and make sure that it's always up to date. So I'm gonna create here very quickly. I have my 3D the setup, so let's have a look at that very quickly. So I have my camera and some of the elements and where the position is and how that is moving. So what I want to do is share this as well with my artist as a live group. So I'm gonna call this, I'm gonna use the scene node as the bottom. I'm gonna say okay, and I'm gonna, before I actually publish it, I'm gonna clean it up, because you can see that I have a bunch of inputs that I don't want the artist to use. All I'm interested on, you can see I have all the live inputs that are looking at my script. And I'm not interested in those at the moment, so I'm just gonna erase all of those live inputs. I don't want them inputting anything into that. This is just the data that I want them to use. And with that done, I'm gonna publish that as well for my artist. This is gonna be, again, just find where I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna call this, this is gonna be camera tracker, camera data, actually V01. If one day I learn how to spell, let's leave it like that. So I'm gonna say open and okay. And I just published that out. So let's have a look how an artist will jump into this. So as we have already worked on the king, I'm not gonna show you that one, but I'm gonna show you the background. So let's actually think that I'm another artist, completely different artist, and I'm working on that background. So I'm gonna open that in a separate Nuke script. There you are. And what I'm gonna do is, as you can see, I have all my elements here, and I can start doing that comp. But I would like to see this in reference. I want to have the camera data in case I want to reproject something onto the shot or anything like that. So the best thing is I can very quickly just go and say, I can create a live group. And all I need to do is point it to where that is. So I'm gonna go and find my live group here. So if I'm not in there, that's not where I'm supposed to be. Let's say here, and let's actually bring the camera data. I'm gonna open the camera data, and now that I have my camera data in here, I can start using the information from there. So I can very easily add user knobs. So I'm going to say manage user knobs, and I can go and say pick, and I can pick, let's say, from the camera, and I can use, what do we want from the camera? We can use translate, rotate, we can get the can get on the projection, sorry, focal and the aperture, anything like that, and say okay. And now I have all the data there ready for me that I can use and attach to anything else that I'm doing on this shot. Let's say I want to actually see how the work I'm doing here in the background matches with the nuking that the guys are doing. So if I again create a live group here, I could very easily start kind of looking at what is happening with other parts of the shot. So I can, let's bring the king on the version 2. I know that the artist doing the king is actually quite far ahead. So now I can merge those two just to have a look, and I can bring that, if I reload that, should be able to find, up if I swap the inputs. Now I can have and see how his work is matching with mine. So I can start doing any grading, any matching, tracking, anything that I need to do on this shot while I'm pre-basing what the other artists are working. So if I go back into my main script, we can now think that me as a supervisor or as the lead of the shot, all I have to do is to version up my clips to see the latest versions or have the latest bits and pieces of it. So I could go Alt up and version that up, and you can see exactly what is happening on that frame. So if you didn't see that, let's bring that down. See what is happening there, and if I go Alt up, there you are. It's a much cleaner version. It's actually way nicer, and I can start checking what is going on, and I can do the rest of the work that I'm supposed to be doing here by finishing the shot in any way. So one really cool thing about the live groups is that even though they're external and people is working on them, and as I said, you can create your own, show up the different parameters from nodes that are inside, you can do kind of manage those based on each comp. So here the artist has actually worked on it, didn't do that much blurring of the edges as I needed, especially for her, or I don't know, if I decide to do anything extra there, I can very, very easily just expose the knob from the blur that is working on that matte, and very, very easily just go and start tweaking that as I want to. And if I really push it, you can see, obviously I'm pushing quite a lot just to show you, but you can see how I'm actually starting to blur that matte and decide how those edges are going to work coming in. So that is one of the really big advantages. And now you can see how the icon is yellow here while this one is gray. What that means is when it's yellow, it actually has something local that is changing that live group. So even though it's coming from somewhere else, I'm doing a few tweaks into this specific comp, inside this comp, and that live group now is local. So it, in a sense, it has copied all that information, put it in there, and now I can tweak it, and it's only for this shot, but the other artists could be doing anything, or that matte can be used on any other shot without being affected. I really think this is going to change the way we work. It's going to make our life so much easier. No shot nowadays, or very few shots nowadays, are done by a single artist. So sharing is caring, as they say. So there you are. That's live groups and how to share and have a more collaborative workflow. So that was the new live groups and a new collaborative workflow. Again, I'm really excited with it, and I think it's going to change the way we work and how we collaborate between different artists on a single comp. So those are the updates on Nuke and Nuke X, and now into Studio. So a lot of people is working with Studio, and they are doing way bigger and more complex timelines than they were doing before. Again, managing the projects is getting more complex and more difficult. So we decided to add something to be able and make sure that you can play back those complex projects, but also how you create those complex projects way easily. So the first thing we added is adding AEF nonlinear retimes. But we didn't just added the nonlinear retimes to the AEF importer. We actually went and fixed a whole bunch of bugs into the AEF importer to make sure that you have a really robust and nice way of starting your projects by using AEF and creating those timelines with multiple tracks and everything in one go. And for the playback, we decided to add something called timeline disk caching. So let me show you that. So this sequence is quite simple. You have already the graded plates that have been already comped and added in there, so that's easy to play back, no trouble. But the problem is once you hit something like this. So in this case, I have about 4 different plates that are combining and doing comp inside the timeline. Plus I'll probably add a bunch of soft effects, and I'm actually running on a laptop right now, so these will be quite a heavy thing for my laptop to run. And so let's say I actually not hitting that playback, right? So what is timeline disk caching? Timeline disk caching allows me to make a very quick render through the GPU into a file, into an EXR sequence that is going to render all this into that single EXR sequence and have it for me to play back. So you can do this in several ways. You can now have this icon on the left, which allows you to cache the whole sequence or clear the cache or go into caching settings. You can also do through right clicking, you can cache this cache, and again sequence range. So again, if I have the whole sequence or selected shot ranges, so in this case I have selected some of those shots and that's the section I'm going to do caching, or I could have put in and outs in my timeline. So I can use, let's use the selected range. So that will go and start caching, and you can see how that icon changed. And if I zoom in here, you're going to see this now orange bar changing. So now we have the white bar is your RAM cache, and the orange bar is going to be your disk caching. What this is doing is again rendering EXR files into your fastest disk for you to play back. So if I now come around here, I can see that that is way faster to load. I can see how that render is happening, and I'll be able to play back that reliably as my machine is not powerful enough to run it, but because I have now timeline disk caching, I can do it. This will allow you to do bigger projects, more complex timelines, and again, you could be caching the whole sequence if you're doing a review session, especially when you don't want to localize all the footage, and if you have really long clips on your timelines that have a lot of handles, and if you localize everything, then it takes all the space of your machine. Sometimes it's easier just to do disk caching. That way what you're doing is just only caching what you have on that timeline. So again, there you are. That now is that whole section being able to play back at the right frame rate as I need it to go. So that is what timeline disk caching does. So those were all the nodes and new features I wanted to show you in Nuke 11. This is a quick recap of what we just covered. So again, we have updated to BFX platform 2017. We are now also added the latest operating systems to Windows 10 and OS X Sierra and CentOS 7. We have also added live groups, the background rendering into Nuke from Nuke Studio, the frame server. Extended creative toolsets for all those junior artists or anyone that wants to learn or even kind of mid-level artists that want to check different techniques. We have also done the Denoise update, so again, making it way faster and using the vectors to do temporal denoising. And we have added AMD GPU support and ARRI and R3D SDK updates. We have also added the lens distortion to Nuke X, which is a great new lens distortion model, so go and try it. We also have the Smart Vector toolset improvements, which again, we know a lot of you have been working on it, and we think these little tiny extra bits will make your life a lot easier. And into the Nuke Studio side, again, timeline descaching for those complex timelines. We have added the AEF nonlinear retimes and all the bugs to make sure that the AEF importer is solid. And something we are announcing is we are doing a HP certified platform. So now you have a box that we test on and make sure that it runs the best for when you're running Nuke Studio into your complex projects. And that is it from me. So now I'm gonna hand this to you guys. So fire any questions.